Imagine this. Your workplace, once a frozen tundra, now transformed into a flourishing rainforest of innovation, collaboration, and growth. Sounds incredible, right? That's the power of cultivating a rainforest team culture. In this one-day training, you'll learn how to build a team culture that attracts top talent, boosts engagement, and fuels success. Jason Kay's proven framework will guide you through creating a thriving cultural ecosystem where your team's potential knows no limits. Rain or shine, your journey starts here. Sign up today at www.jasonkay.com. That's www.jasonkae.com.
Hello, welcome to the Rooms with Ronald podcast, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. In 2023, I set an intention to shop 100 apartment communities to see how leasing was evolving around the country. Rooms with Ronald was born out of that experience. In this series, I share my experiences and engage in meaningful conversations with other professionals in the industry as we discuss all things related to leasing and marketing. Join in as we expand the Rooms with Ronald experiment. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington, and in this podcast, we talk all things leasing and marketing. I am so excited for my guest today. The brilliant, the iconic Lisa Nickerson is joined here with me today. She is the CEO and founder of Nickerson Company. Lisa, thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedule to meet with me.
Thank you, Ronald, for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I love your avocado shirt.
Thanks. I wanted to.
Very California.
Excited. Well, Lisa, why don't you let's just jump in and tell us who you are.
Yeah. So I own an agency called Nickerson. I also own a company called Nickerson Ventures that invests in property tech related, or technology for property, if you all know property tech. And that those companies then work in tandem with my agency. But by way of background, I think it's important to note, even in college, I was doing rentals of apartments and I loved it. And I wanted to someday be a real estate developer. And then after college, I went into commercial brokerage and was doing brokerage and leasing and investment sales. And I also loved that. And then I started the agency. And over the past 20 years, while I've owned the agency, I've also owned a brokerage that did new construction sales. And the agency has been supporting developers and owners all over the country for years now in different ways to market and sell and lease property. But the reason I wanted to always give that background is because I think that there are people in marketing or in public relations that don't always understand that everything they do has to have a result. It has to lead to an action. And as a former salesperson or leasing I understand that. And I understand that everything that we do really has to have an ROI to it and has to help make things happen. Lots of different things that I touch and do, but I just love real estate. So
yeah. So let's talk about the agency just a little bit to give some people, right? So you said you help them market. What does that entail? What services do you offer to these companies?
So the agency that I own does marketing, public relations, strategy, consulting, even CMO level work where we'll come in if you don't have a marketing team and we can be your marketing team without having to pay full time for all of those people, right? And then we work very closely with the leasing or the sales teams to ensure that what we're doing works. And then we can pivot very quickly if we need to. But you really need to be looking at everything, whether it's public perception, social media, what people are hearing when they walk in the door, right? Those are all really important components of what makes a successful lease up or get something sold. And it can't just be about what the digital numbers are telling you or what the web traffic looks like, right? I think it's very easy to plug things into a spreadsheet and say, this is what we're seeing. But it's just as important to talk to the leasing team and say, what are people saying when they walk in the door, right? What are they saying when they see certain things here? And how do we know what's working from that feedback? And so we will work very closely with the asset managers, the property managers, sometimes the developers themselves to help them really create that narrative and understand what works best for the property and sometimes the community.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so important to kind of have that too, because a lot of times when you have managers on site, they're only telling one side of the story, right? Oh, my people they're not leasing because the price is too high, which is always the go-to. Or we need more traffic, and then they have 300 leads that they're not responding to, right? And so it sounds like you kind of come in and you kind of give that whole view of like, that's what they're saying, but here's also the other side that you're not seeing.
Right. Very similar to how my whole team is. They don't sit back and just say, okay, if they see something, they say something. And sometimes that's just what has to happen. Somebody might, just be letting something go because they think it's okay. And we might say, have you thought about changing the signage in this way? Have you thought about doing this? And trying to add that value. So
yeah. Live. It's just like, it's kind of like, in my eyes, that just reminded me of when I go on tour and there's like trash on the ground and the leasing agent just walks right by it and pretend it isn't there. And I'm just like, I would rather you acknowledge it and like pick it up and like fix the problem than just pretend that I didn't see it.
Ronald, I think we talked about this another time that when I was in college, I worked for the Ritz-Carlton, and I remember the manager walking me around. And as he walked around, he picked up this little piece of trash and he said, there's nobody that's above making this place as great as it can be and as excellent as it can be. And he just was letting me know that this is what the culture was. And I think that that's another thing. The tone comes from the top, right? And so if everybody is always about improving and making things better and having them be the best they can be, then it certainly makes for a better experience for everyone.
Yeah. So you've been doing this a long time. This agency has been super successful. So let's kind of take a step back and think about the evolution of marketing and leasing, because it has changed a lot. Even in the last 4 years. And then when I came in the industry 10 years ago, I was very fortunate to work for a company now looking, what they say, hindsight is 2020, right? That was very technological forward. All these things that people are rolling out now, it's like, I was doing that 10 years ago. So let's kind of talk about what has changed in marketing over the course of your career.
Sure. Well, as you also know, I'm the CMO and CRO of a company called Infinity, which is an AI leasing tool that's available on the website or on as a link to a property 24/7. And the AI alone, we could just talk about that all day and how this has just taken over. Of course, everybody's saying they're AI. I'm sure your golf club has AI on it now, and I'm not even kidding. So I think that people are looking at data in an entirely different way than they were before. But like anything, right? Remember when our phones first came out and it made life easier for us, but now we're tied to them?
Yep.
What's really changed is, first of all, everything happens so much faster, right? We can get websites up faster. We can put things up faster. We can get imagery faster. We can do virtual tours through space. We can just find out more, and we can put the information out, whether it's through social media or podcasts or not just putting an ad in a newspaper. When I started, I was comparing ads in newspapers, and now I don't think we even think about putting ads in newspapers. So that's where everything has changed, but there's so much more to think about, and you have to have experts in various areas now. You're your digital expert, your AI expert. You still have to have public relations. I will never not want that to be a key part of someone's strategy. And then you take those PR pieces and that secured media, and how do you utilize that in your digital marketing or in your social? How do you train the AI on things that people might have read online, both that's accurate and maybe even inaccurate, right? So you can train your AI to be able to talk to people in a certain way. And then how do you take all that data that you can get now that you couldn't get before? So like with Infinity, if somebody engages in an Infinity room with the AI, you know what they're asking for, you know where they're touring, you know where they're looking. And in an Infinity room, it also takes them to the Google Street View around the area. You can look at schools and restaurants and coffee shops and things like that, all in that one platform. Now the leasing agent has so much information. So the next morning when they see, oh, Ronald Harrington was on at 11 o'clock last night, not only do they know you were there, but they know everything you asked about and what you did. And so when they call you back, they're like, come on in, we're going to show you that 3-bedroom. And oh, by chance you like that stove, or you wanted to know the gym, or, whatever it is, you have so much more information so that people are qualified leads, and then you can follow up. What won't change, and you just brought up, is that people still need to follow up. They still need to follow up, follow through, know their product, and be on point. So the other thing that I'm seeing a lot more of is with this AI, we can train the AI once on what a tour should look like and what you should say. And then the AI can train the sales team. So think about that. Somebody like yourself, who's an expert, could train the AI for a whole bunch of different properties and then they can do trainings with the AI to know what is the most ideal tour? What are people asking about the most? And what's the best way to answer this question? So I think I just answered a whole bunch of things in one thing, but
you did. No, it's so valuable. I mean, and I feel like we see that a lot now with like leasing agents using Chat GPT, right? Like that's how they're writing their follow-up, and it's making them smarter, and then going to check it kind of makes that like even better for me, because I'm like, at least I know it's going to be well written. As long as they go in and do the legwork and verify that the information's correct and there's no hallucinations in there or anything like that.
Yeah.
Which you would be shocked that people don't do that either, but here we are.
Well, Ronald, to that point, and we've seen that, right? Where somebody doesn't check it and suddenly that the bathroom's noted as a retreat, right? And so, we still need people to go through and check the context of what we're looking at. Or, we had one the other day where it was a single family product, but we knew that the library was blocks away, right? So the AI might have said it was X amount of miles away, but we wanted to rewrite it in a way that it was just blocks away from where the house was and things like that. So, again, giving some of that context over time, the AI does learn though, and it can take that information and be better the next time.
Yeah. So, having this expansive career that you have, is there anything like maybe when you started or, kind of along the way that you wish would come back, like from like a marketing or a leasing standpoint?
Oh, that's a tricky question. What would come back?
You're just like we're making great strides. That's okay too. I'm just always curious, like what, and the only why I ask is because I'm seeing a couple of things, right? Like if I had to hear one more person tell me back to basics, I'm going to like come through a screen at somebody, because I'm like, what does that mean to you? You have to kind of define that, because when you say back to basics, how far back are you going? And that's probably outdated.
So Ronald, tell me, what are people saying from a back to basics? Like, what would that look like?
Oh, I'm seeing I think what they mean, if they're trying to say what I call the leasing foundation, right? They're wanting, what's the customer service, right? And I think so much time right now, people have spent so much energy and time to define the customer experience.
Sure.
Without defining what their customer service is, because they're two different things.
Yeah.
Have a great customer experience. I'm like, so you have great touch points along the way, but what about the customer service that your humans and your bots are actually doing, right? So that's not back to a basic to me. Like, but
just doing it right.
That is. I've been finding it interesting that people are seeing I'm seeing a rise in paper guest cards again when I go on site, like people wanting a paper guest card. I'm like, you can still do that with the tablet.
Well, let me ask you a question. I hadn't thought about that. Let's think about this for a second. If I'm writing out my name, I'm not putting like L Nick, right? But if I'm doing it on a tablet, I'm notorious for doing L Nick and then my spammy Gmail, right? So if I wrote it, would I be more apt to write my full name? Am I more apt to give a different email? I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting thought.
Well, for me, you should never be writing it if you're invited to my property as a tour. I should be taking care of all that for you. I should be entering it in there, because you're not going to the doctor's office. When you go to a doctor's office, they give you the forms to fill out, right? And we all hate them. Like that's not the kind of a environment we want to do, because I will tell you, when I shop a property, if someone gives me a paper guest card to fill out, I'm like, so what are you getting paid for then, to be honest? Because like, that's what you should be doing to make it easier for me. Like I should come in and it should be like the Ritz-Carlton, right? Like I go in and like they welcome me, they offer me a refreshment. They don't hand me the rules and regulations of the hotel anymore, and I have to sign the digital, like the old paper register that they would put in the files, and that's how they knew who was in the hotel. That's what we have technology for. So like if they're having you fill it out, then I would be apt to be putting in the actual fake information, because I don't want to have to do that work. Not that I'm lazy, but I'm paying you money.
True facts. No, I'm with you. I would say then, with all of this technology, right? What I see that I don't like is people ticking boxes, right? So again, our digital traffic was X. We booked a tour, it was X. This many people applied for a lease and they're like, I'm done. My job is done. Right. But wait a minute. How many people were approved, for example? So we did that in an audit once because the developer was like, why are they telling me that we should be in great shape? Because they're taking like all the stats look good and their reports look good. And I went through it and I said, well, because you're rejecting 50% of the people who are applying. Not only is this not working and you're wasting your time because you're having to reject 50 people or 50% of the people, but we have to back up completely to the beginning of who are we even bringing into the property in the first place, right? We need to look at all of the marketing, all the targeting, all of the demographics, and we helped them retool that and how they were targeting people. So I think it can't be just, let me fill out the box and say, yep, oh, this hit the average, this hit the number, this hit the baseline, right? And check out. You have to take it all the way through to what is our occupancy, right? And are we getting this leased up? And is what we're doing working? And if not, we need to change it. And so I think I do see a lot of reports and a lot of box ticking. And I think when we didn't have so many things that we could just put quantitative data into, it was very simple. We were either selling or we weren't. If we weren't selling, we had to do something different. So I would say that's what I would like. That's maybe old school, but it seems like it's just reading the data properly.
So how do you feel about, there's a lot of new push for the automation reporting, the Power BIs and all of this that are like pulling the data.
Yeah.
And what we hear is it's to make your life easier. It's so, we can analyze it quicker. Do you think that when people aren't really looking at it like we have to used to, right? At least when you had to check the box, you kind of had to cherry pick what boxes you were checking and what data you were looking at. Now these Power BIs and all this automation is pulling it for you that we're only looking at the percentage. We're not going back. Do you think that's going to cause a problem in the future?
I think it's like everything. It's how you train people. It's how you coach people up to be looking for things, right? And also there could be averages that you're looking for, baselines, but how do you improve them, right? I think, how do we always have a little bit of a competition of sorts where we want to get it higher or better? How do we continually improve? So, and then the other thing is that, data can be wrong, right? Imagine that the data that we get is wrong. And so when are we looking for a red flag? And so, that's the type of thing that we have to say, wait a minute, maybe something's not right there, or maybe it's not an outlier. I don't know. I just think that it's always in how we train somebody to look at the data, pull the data, read the data, and then what are we choosing to do with the data? Even if the data is recommending something, what are we doing?
Right. I think and honestly, the data may not be wrong. It might just be a user error, right? This companies that I find that push for a closing ratio percentage, right? If you're, my baseline is you have to close 45% of your traffic. What end up happening from a leasing standpoint is that pressure comes a lot. So guess what I stopped doing? I stopped putting in the shows that I don't think are going to lease. So now right. My shows are down.
You're manipulating the data.
I'm manipulating the data to benefit me because I've been told if you're not 45%, you're going to get fired, right? Which I think it goes back to, I told you this when we first started talking. I think that we as an industry look at wrong data. I think companies spend too much time looking at the closing ratio, and that is the only thing that they look at. And I'm like, but what about all the other people that never even came to tour?
Well, okay. So Ronald, we see this with Infinity, right? So with Infinity, we will note in one property that we worked on in Waltham, Massachusetts, because we had access to the website and all of the data, we could really break it down. 80% of their leases were spending 15 minutes in the Infinity room, which means they were doing full tours before they even went to go see the property, right? What we don't know right now is how many people, we can know how many people are bouncing off your website, but you don't even know what they were looking for. You don't know why. And why aren't we counting that, right? Why is it that we are happy with this minuscule group of people just booking a tour and that's like, oh, well, that's good. How is it that we're engaging the person we got there in the first place? And if they didn't find what they were looking for right away, they might have gone somewhere else. So it's really important that we're also looking at how we're engaging people when they actually go there, right? And what do we find out about them so that we can better target them in the future?
Yeah. And it sounds like, with this room and having all this data, that's going to make my life easier as a leasing professional.
So let me ask you this though. There are people that feel that if they adopt these different technologies that make their lives easier, they'll be out of a job. Do you hear that?
I hear it all the time, right? I hear that, right? That's been this, which is I would say is a misconceived notion, right? It's not here to take a job because guess what? We are in a people business. We are always going to need people to do our business. I think we've learned that. We saw during COVID the rise of people taking their people off property and going, remotely, and the only people on property were maintenance professionals. And we see a lot of those companies still aren't standing, right? They've been sold because that did not work, because people still want to have a human connection.
Sure.
I want to know that I could call Lisa and say, Lisa, hey, I went to the website. I saw this coffee shop that was around the corner. Is that good coffee?
Yeah.
The bot can't tell me that, right? Because I'm not going to trust, because I'm going to trust your opinion. I want to know who you are. So I just need my job to be easier, right? So I can focus on, okay, so I have this little part of people. I'm going to get this up. And they're going to leave. So now I can focus on the 90% of people and figure out what can I do to convert more traffic onto my website into a tour, into a resident, because now I have time to do that.
In theory, but we need to get people there. We need to have them realize that this is really good for them, right? And that change is good, and there's better ways of doing things and more efficient ways, and that, they're not just going to lose a job, right?
It kind of goes back to how you do the implementation and kind of how you sell the product, right? Where I think we lose the credibility with staff, especially the on-site teams, is you have the people in the corporate office making the decisions.
Right.
Who have probably not stepped on site in 5, 6, 7 years to lease an apartment. So they don't really know the struggles because they hear it 2, 3, 4 times removed from the actual person of here's we're struggling, right? So I think when we're, vetting technology, we need all people represented at the table. You need the leasing staff. You need the person who is going to be super gung-ho and this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Because they're going to champion. But you also need the person who's probably your most resistant to tech. They need to be at the table too. Because they need to see it. And then they can ask those questions to the product developers who are going to have the answers, and they're going to be able to offer feedback, and you're going to be able to see, here's the resistance. And if we're comparing 2 different softwares, my person who's least resistant was actually a little bit more resistant to this product over this product. So I might need to dig in a little bit more and say, is this a better fit for my company? Because now they're going to be a little bit more bought in. So we had to get their buy-in.
I couldn't agree with you more. And isn't it interesting when you ask those resistant people why they're resistant and you really work it through, it could have nothing to do with something, right? And everything to do with something else, right? That has and so it's just having those open conversations and not having something just forced on somebody, right?
Yeah. I mean, think about it I always think about Apple, right? When the first iPhone came out, it wasn't like an overnight success. There was a lot of resistance, right? I was one of those people. I'm an early adopter of everything. I had a BlackBerry. I remember getting my first
BlackBerry. I needed the keyboard.
Yeah. And now I was just so I remember I got my first iPhone. I had it for about a week, and I went back to the AT&T store and I said, can you take this back? I need my BlackBerry back. And they're like, it's going to be, a 300% restocking fee. And I was like, I'll learn to love it at the time. So now I can't imagine my life without my iPhone.
I didn't know why I was going to need a camera on my phone. I didn't. I was like, why am I going to need a camera on my phone?
Right. And I feel like people are the same way when it comes to some of this leasing technology, right? Virtual tours being a lot of people are we don't need virtual tours. No one's going to want to tour virtually. No.
People are still saying that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I still call people and try to schedule tours. I'm like, I can't make it to your property. I'm coming from out of state. Can we do a live virtual tour? And they're like, no, we have no technology to do that.
Wow. I didn't know that I didn't think people were bucking that because, I mean, at this point, we're an Amazon society, right? If I need another container of shampoo, I just order it. So it's here later today or tomorrow. Like I do so much online and we want instant gratification. We want things immediately. We expect things immediately. I mean, my gosh, I ordered my last car online. No joke. And so to think that we're building properties, particularly some of these multifamily properties that are huge, expensive assets, and that we're not putting the very best technology on them just seems a little crazy. But this all gets back to what you did. We have to get the right people to have the buy-in. And if the right people have the buy-in, and they understand how it benefits them and helps them and doesn't threaten them, then we might be in a different spot.
And I also think too, the other problem we're having is that our on-site teams are experiencing tech fatigue. I mean, if you have been in the industry for more than 2 years, you have probably seen so much tech come on, right? Like 20 to 30 different logins, right? So then every time something else gets rolled out, it's just like, here's something else I have to learn, right? And then it rolls out and then we forget about it. Let me ask you a question.
Yep. So I was on with an asset manager today about an audit. They actually want their entire portfolio to be audited, which I said, kudos to you. So often people do it like one at a time. Nope. They want an overview of the whole thing. So that was great. But one of the things they keep hearing is that the leasing teams don't want new tech because they don't want to train people. And they're like, what do you mean? So they were talking about this resistance to even want to train people on new tech. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think that goes back to culture and tone at the top, that some groups are really excited about something that's going to make things better, but maybe they're compensated in a way that more sales, more leases actually works to their benefit, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I think when we're talking about like training people on new tech, I think the problem comes down to it is, I'm a training manager. This is what I do for a living.
Yep.
I'm not always at the table from start to finish, right? Like the contract's usually signed. You have people, and this happens all the time in training worlds. You have people who then they'll sit through the initial trainings with the company. And a lot of times the tech company doesn't have how it's going to be really in a live environment. So the trainings are theories, like this is how it should work. And then you go live. And as a trainer, I've had the same amount of training, and I'm not the subject matter expert as my on-site teams. So then it's like, well, I have to scramble behind the scenes and figure it out. So I think there's that reluctance too. So I think it's, again, bringing people in earlier, right? Like if you're really serious about rolling out this product, your training team or the person who is going to have to go teach the masses and be the subject matter expert have to be it from the beginning. And because you have the executives and you have the tech companies, a lot of times they don't have the L&D background to understand the 2 to 3 people removed. How is it going to affect the end user? Because we always make products with the CEO and the top level user in mind, not the end user.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing I think is that there's a lot of the property tech companies, and I think that this is where our successes come in, that don't have the real estate background, right? So they're solving a problem, but they don't necessarily know how leasing teams work and how they really interact and things like that. And so understanding the handholding and just the training that we're talking about and the continued service so that we can help improve and make things better. I know that's something that we've been working hard at with Infinity and others that we've talked to. I really impress upon them how important this is because they will get blocked. Or the other one, I don't know if you've seen, is when people overpromise what it will do or how fast it will be or things like that. And then it's like, don't overpromise because you will be out so fast that, it's just doesn't work.
Especially because I don't think the tech companies really understand the turnover rate in multifamily and how high it is. So you have to factor that in when you're promising something, right? If I'm a tech company and I'm going to pitch a client, that's one of the very first questions. One of my very first questions would be, can you tell me your annual turnover percentage on who the end user is going to be, right? So if this product is for the leasing and on-site team in the office, what's your office turnover rate? Because that's going to affect what I promise you. Because if you're turning over 50% a year, well, I rolled out in 6 months. 6 months from now, it's going to be a whole new group of people that are going to have to learn it and adapt to it. So that's going to slow down the progress on there. Let me ask you, so, with the Infinity, you've kind of already started to set the stage for the future of what future leasing is going to be like, knowing like the customer. What else do you think is going to be in the future that we're going to have to adapt in leasing to stay competitive and to win over prospects?
Good question. To win over prospects. I mean, I do think, and I think you're seeing this too, how everything is becoming more about hospitality, right? And more about service and more of like being in a hotel. So if you're going to have a trade-off of not owning property and that upside, there's got to be something else that's so good, right? That you can't give it up. And so I think as we become more hospitality driven, and it's not just amenities, but it's really understanding how people live and that holistic being, right? I think that that's something that will be more of the future, right? And how that all works. It won't just be about the yoga class and the movie night, right? So, I remember when bocce came in and everybody had to have a bocce court, like it's going to have to be a lot more about like just how we live. And I think, multifamily took advantage of COVID in a way where they could have places for people to work and be people to socialize and things like that. And I think those will continue to evolve. And I think properties will need to evolve. I remember being at a property in New York that had a full-size basketball court and some other things. And, is that what people are utilizing? How are they using it? And, have you seen that now the condos and the apartments that overlook ballparks, right? And so they can actually watch the game. And how much that is added value to those properties because people can have parties and watch games and things like that. So,
they turned an old property here in Indianapolis that was on a baseball diamond, right? So they like where the dugout is and everything, and it looks like a stadium, and like that baseball diamond is still behind there.
Yeah. And so there's that. Then there's also, I spoke on EV at the OpTech conference recently, and looking at how many more cars are going to be EV at properties, and how do you manage for that, and how do you charge for that? They find that people who have electric cars and the space is right by the building, they can charge a premium for that. And I know that when I have my car, I want to know that I have my spot to park it in to charge. And so, I think EV is a big piece of it, and people are caring a lot more about sustainability and about what the owner cares about, right? Now, I don't know if you see this because I still hear a debate on this that owners will say people aren't asking for it. They're not asking for sustainability. They're not asking for composting and all these various things. I was interviewed recently by US News and World Report, and they said, people want these things. Why do you think they're not getting them? And I said, that's a really good question. They're not asking. So I think just because a property doesn't have something that you really want, that you think, whether it's recycling or composting or alternatives to plastic bottles, things like that, nicely suggest it. Don't demand it, don't criticize, but not only suggest it, but do you have a solution as to like what they could do or how they could do it? Or do you want to spearhead something? Because I think that just by people having conversations, again, properties will evolve to what people want.
Well, to that point, I think what happens is that people aren't asking for it because they're already writing you off before they're not going to come see you because they've already done their homework. So they're picking the properties that are like, I see you have compact. I see your recycling, your sustainability. That's what I'm going to go to. I'm not going to go to property B because they don't have, that's what's important to me. So like,
that's good.
Instead of us asking them, instead of them asking us, we should be surveying our residents and saying, is this stuff important to you? Mm-hmm. This is the time to do it. But I want to go back to, because I was just thinking about how you can track where people are at in the Infinity Room and all of that. Yeah. Do you think, in 5 to 2, 3, 5 years that you're going to be able to have enough data from that you're going to start to see what is important to people on the amenity front? Because we take a stab 100%. In the dark amenities, right? And we're just like, here we go. So we're going to be able to say, and that's going to make me a better developer because I'm going to say, I have this data. Mm-hmm. Here's where people are spending a majority of their time. And now maybe, just maybe, they will use the space.
Yeah. Or if they're asking, do you have this? Do you have that? And we know where they're going around in the neighborhood. If they're looking for the train, if they're looking for parking, if they're looking for certain types of restaurants, right? That's information you have no idea right now that's important to them. right? If they're looking at schools, I didn't know I was attracting that many people that have children, right? Like, so again, this is just a whole nother level of data that could actually inform other things too, as to whether the amenities are, or maybe, that people want another coffee shop. Maybe we put a coffee shop on site instead, right? I mean, who knows? And we create a retail environment. Like, there's just so much information that we'll be able to do. And then I even look at how are we going to be able to model out homes and what do people want the most, right? So if they're like, we could do the same unit and model it out in various different ways. And then people are even able to buy that furniture off that. They know it fits. They know it works. They know what it looks like. They can just buy the room, right? Shop the look and that type of thing. And we know more about what that person wants. There's just so much we can start to do with this data that we haven't had before.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Well, Lisa, this has been great. Like the banter that we have, this has been awesome. Any final thoughts on like what leasing is going to look like in the future before we wrap up?
My final thought is for people to have an open mind, right? And for people to just be open to the idea. And yes, I do think that people are tech tired, right? They're having something new put to them all the time. And then there's upgrades and changes and things like that. But just to have a really open mind, because the more that you can bring to the table from ideas of how we can do things better, the more you are going to elevate even in your profession, and you won't be out of a job. If you don't want to get on board, that might be how it doesn't work, right? And so I just think that the more people that can think about the big picture of how they're targeting people, the big picture about what's working, asking questions, leaning into curiosity, and then thinking about how something can just help make them better, and sharing that with management, asset management, different groups. I think that it will help us all do a lot faster, better. And the more we do faster, better, the more we can build more housing. We all need more housing. We need it to pencil. And the way it pencils is if we cut costs. And so we just need to be more efficient. Curiosity, lean into the curiosity, ask questions.
I love that. Well, Lisa, if people want to reach out to you to learn more about the agency or to learn more about the Infinity Room, where can we send them to you?
I would say our website's a great spot. It's Nickerson, COS, like NickersonCompanies.com. And then on LinkedIn, we put a lot on LinkedIn. And we've such a great team and so well versed in the industry. And we would love to talk to anybody, even if it's just to bounce ideas off of you. We would love to hear from everyone.
Well, perfect. We will make sure that, guys, that is tagged on our LinkedIn post, both of those places. Lisa, it has been a joy having you on Rooms with Ronald today. I
love talking to you, Ronald. I really do.
I've made a list of notes of everything I need to go think about now and like reframe in my mind. So I hope our listeners learned a little something as well. You have been listening to Rooms with Ronald, a podcast on all things leasing and marketing. And until next time, guys, happy leasing. Bye.
Bye.